Welcome everyone. As you know, at RVC we like to talk about what we're learning. We like to talk about ways the sector can change to support BIPOC leadership and orgs. But one thing we haven't really had a chance to do is to talk about and with our partner orgs about what they are doing. I know I've said this, but our partners are creating some of the best solutions to some of the biggest issues that we have in our communities, and we rarely get a chance to highlight that at RVC. And so we're trying to start a community solutions blog series where we really focus on the types of things our partners are working on. Today we're going to focus on restorative justice. And for folks who don't know what restorative justice is, I'm going to use the definition from Amplify RJ. That's restorative justice is a philosophy and a set of practices rooted in indigenous teachings that emphasize our interconnection by repairing relationships when harm occurs while proactively building and maintaining relationships to prevent future harm. And this can happen across sort of the school to prison to deportation pipeline. There's a lot of places in the ecology of restorative justice where you find community organizations, leaders, healers at work. So I'm going to turn it over to our partners. If you all can introduce yourselves, just love to hear your name, your organization, and kind of what role you're playing in this bigger movement of restorative justice in our area. Want to start here?
No, but I will. I'm Sierra Parsons. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm with WA-BLOC, which stands for Washington Building Leaders of Change. And where we show up is in schools. We support schools with implementing school-wide restorative practices so that we can equip school communities to repair harm holistically.
Awesome. I'm Jasmine Vale. She, her pronouns, and I work with Restorative Community Pathways. We are a pre-court diversion program, which just means that the referrals that come from the prosecuting attorney's office come to us before there's any interaction with the court system. And we are a network of care with many community orgs as a consortium that creates space for restorative justice and healing for alleged youth that have experienced harm from the system, and also harm parties that are experiencing current harm. And we create space for them to step into that network of care.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm Nikita Oliver. I use they, them pronouns. I am a part of Creative Justice, which is an arts-based healing engaged space for youth and young adults. We started out as a diversion program in 2015 and quickly realized how hard it is to do restorative justice when your relationship with the courts is so tight. And so moved to a place where instead of simply receiving young people who had active court cases, young people could self-refer, community members, community partners could refer young folks to be a part of this network of care before ever interacting with the court system in any way. And we do all of our work with a focus of being rooted in arts and culture practices, knowing that art is such a powerful tool for internal healing, external healing, community healing, but it's also a very important tool for speaking truth to power. So a big piece of our work, in addition to holding those spaces for healing, is providing spaces to be able to transform the system that is often causing harm, because we know the first place that people experience harm usually is not interpersonally, but it's from these systems, these oppressive systems that we live under. So using art to be able to transform those systems, to tell our stories, to preserve our history and our culture is really important and powerful for moving to a place of liberation.
So for each of your orgs, why did you all think we need this? We need to build this movement in our community. Why did you feel that we needed it in King County, and why is this just a real alternative to the impacts of the incarceral system?
Yeah, I'm happy to hop in first. For Creative Justice, it was really rooted in the No New Youth Jail movement that started in like 2010, 11, 12, when King County put a ballot measure, an initiative for a levy to fund the new quote-unquote Children and Family Justice Center, so the new youth jail. For every capital project the county does, 1% of those dollars has to go to the arts. And we had some really great allies that were working for Culture, the county's nonprofit arts arm at the time, who pushed the county to give a portion of those dollars to a group that included Aaron Counts, who was the lead engagement artist, young people who had been incarcerated, parents dealing with the carceral system, artists, one prosecutor, one judge, a public defender, and they got together to select more artists to help develop a program that in that early stage was a diversion program. And what's really powerful about that to me is they could have just used that money to create any random public art. Like, think about some random statue in your neighborhood or a painting that may or may not even reflect the community that it's in, and they chose instead to take a bit of seed money and create space for this group of people to found a project that could respond to dismantling the school to prison pipeline. And so from there, we have really been able to grow on the back and the work of that movement, to partner with other organizations and community members, to partner with young people, to develop art that helps us imagine a world beyond prisons and police. And that's really only possible in this present moment because organizers with the No New Youth Jail movement really held an important line for us as a county, saying that rather than building this new facility to incarcerate and harm more Black, Indigenous, and brown young people, why aren't we investing what ended up being $300 million and not the original 180? Why aren't we putting $300 million into communities, into community-based responses, into housing? And so even though that jail got built, I would say we have had a lot of wins along the way that have allowed orgs like ours and many others to exist, and has brought us to where in July of 2020, Dow Constantine said they would close the jail by 2025.
The initiative that this community has taken in those moments really led to the divestment from court systems into restorative community pathways. The court systems moved $6.9 million into community programming and that network of care that we're talking about, which is allowing community navigators, which is how RCP operates, is through community navigators taking that initiative with youth and creating that space for youth to step into that network of care. That's what's allowing for it. And it's really the divestment that came from that movement that is even why we're even in this office today. So,
WA-BLOC really was born out of the desire to keep Freedom Schools programming going for young people, especially in South Seattle. WA-BLOC helped to host one of the first Freedom Schools sites in Washington State, and Freedom Schools are rooted in the 1964 Freedom Summer, and one of the core beliefs is that schools are agents of social change, and we still believe that, which is why we're still working in schools. But we basically, funding was threatened, and we're like, no, we need to keep this programming going. So quickly raised some money, kept the program going, and then transitioned into the school year where students were making demands for restorative practices, specifically at Rainier Beach High School. Schools can be agents of social change when students are experiencing joy, healing, transformation, and feel safe and like they belong and have a voice. And so students were demanding restorative practices in schools. That's why WA-BLOC stepped into supporting school-wide restorative practices. I think that's something that's so cool about all of the organizations that came out of the Ending Prison Industrial Complex organizers, No New Youth Jail organizers, is that we're responsive. We're not coming in with a pre-established solution. We're really listening to community and for WA-BLOC and Creative Justice and RSP, like listening to young people. What do you want? What do you need? Okay, let's try this. And it's this like beautiful experimentation that WA-BLOC has been able to do over the last several years, originally in high schools. Now we're working more at elementary school level, which is really cool and really cute because those skills are going to transfer and stay and move with those young people as they go into secondary school and, you know, leave school. So that's how WA-BLOC came to be and the role that we accidentally are playing but are doing it really effectively.
I'm really struck by how all three of you talked about how your organizations are responses to these movements and responses to organizing and to what youth wanted. And I'm curious about like why these responses? Why have networks of care? Why focus in on the arts? Why really work on like skills in young people? Like why have these been such power points to moving forth healing or to giving like alternatives to the current like systems that we usually have around punishment?
Why not? That other shit isn't working. Like, it's weak. You know, like Black and brown students are being excluded from schools. They're being excluded from learning environments. And those young people typically have the brightest ideas and the brightest solutions to the social issues that we're facing. The piece that people miss about restorative justice is typically when people are introduced to restorative justice, it's through conflict and through harm, which totally makes sense because it's like, oh, this is how we usually respond to this thing, but is there a different way? And yes, there is restorative practices, but in order for that to happen and be sustainable, building relationships is at the root of all of it. And so we're essentially calling on institutions to invest in building relationships, and that takes a really long time and it's really hard. It's the hard way. RJ is hard. Sitting down and committing to being in right relationship with someone else over a long period of time is an investment.
Especially for Black, Indigenous, and brown folks, we haven't had the opportunity in this on Turtle Island, on this landmass, to be self-determined about how we manage our relationships, about how we care for each other. I think it's so important that, you know, Mariam Kaba talks about a person's first entrance into harm is not causing it, but it is being harmed, and usually by the system. And part of why we leverage art and culture to hold space is because art and culture is literally a part of everything we do all day, every day. From what music you listen to what clothes you put on your body, to the advertisements you pass on your way to school or wherever you're going. It is literally like the glue of society. It holds our stories and our histories. And for Black and Indigenous people, many of us have been stripped of language. We've been stripped of our culture. We've been stripped of access to our peoples. And very intentionally, for those of us who are descendants of the African diaspora and those who are descendants of formerly enslaved Black people here, in providing a space that is rooted in exploring one's art and culture, rooted in exploring oneself internally and understanding how that impacts us externally, building communication skills through poetry, through culinary arts, through dance, through film and photography are really important skills that help us all learn how to better engage with each other. And while a lot of the young people that come to Creative Justice may not consider themselves artists, they are all creatives. And at the heart of the work that we do with Restorative Justice, and at the heart of our work as an abolitionist organization, it is being able to imagine a world beyond prisons and police, being able to imagine a world beyond punitive systems, and imagine a place where people have access to housing and healthcare and clean water and healthy food without all these barriers and challenges, because we know those are the things that keep people safe. But if we can't imagine it, if we can't think beyond what's in front of us, we won't be able to get there. And so being in that dreamy artistic space is healing when you've been hurt, but it is also the only way we're going to get to the world that we want to live in.
The carceral system and the court systems is super damaging. And it's damaging in the form of just the concept of punishment, like on a micro level, and on a systems level, disproportionately affecting BIPOC communities, us. And And when it's done to people groups, whole people groups, it's painful, really, really painful. The concept of relationship and restorative justice, of connecting with another person, is so healing. And with RCP, that's what we're doing. We're creating space for youth, if they want to step into arts, to step into, it's creating space for them and allowing them to create their own path to healing. Everyone deserves a chance to create their own path to healing, and also gives them an opportunity to do that with another person and have their basic needs met in the process also, because it's hard to heal at all when you don't have food. How do you even address those things when there's violence going on around you, when there's no money for food, when there's an eviction notice? How do you address those things? And so RCP is really just creating space for that.
And I'll say, as someone who has caused harm and who had to interact with the criminal legal system for 4 years, it wasn't the felony probation that made me a better person. It was pouring into my community, being engaged in my community, building a network of human beings who were invested in their own healing and own care. People, like, restorative practices and restorative justice isn't aiming to fix anything or anyone. It really is an invitation and an opportunity for individuals to invest in themselves so that we can show up better for each other and for communities.
And I'm just curious what you are seeing as changing in our communities because of the result of this work, or changing for people.
I mean, some of the things that really stick with me, we have young folks that come from different hoods, different gangs, different sets, and they will come to creative justice and negotiate their own peace agreements with each other because they value the space. We have youth who don't have enough food at home coming and working in the garden and now seeing I can actually grow my own food, and taking home chard and kale to feed themselves. There are young folks who will not go to school, but they will come to us as many days a week as they possibly can. And that's always a sign to me that the space that we're holding together is inviting and welcoming, and it feels good. And why can't that be school? Why can't that be the neighborhood you live in? Why can't that be the library? Why can't that be the grocery store? And our hope is that by holding this space and young people developing their skills and their vision, that they are able to then go into spaces like their homes and their schools and bring those pieces to be able to transform those spaces also into restorative spaces. And I think especially in King County, as we're seeing this tough on crime narrative come back up, I think it's so important that we know that young people have the capacity and the energy when their basic needs are met to actually squash that beef and heal that violence on their own, together and collectively. But the key to that is transportation access, food access, knowing that your rent is paid, because I can't think about squashing beef when I can't think about where I'm going to sleep later. And so we see the results of what it looks like when we pay young people's rent for 3 months and they're able to show up to program. The result being that they do make time to leverage those skills to protect the spaces they care about and to build relationships with people they may not have otherwise known because of a street name or a set. And so it feels really important, as King County seems to be at this fork in the road, that we be amplifying and holding space for the ways in which impacted communities are actually doing the work to self-heal, and push King County to continue to invest in that, because it's not been long enough. To your point, 13 years is not enough time to actually heal 300 years worth of 400 years, I don't know how many years. It's been many years of trauma on our communities, but we're doing the work, and we deserve the resources to make this work as thriving and healthy and successful as possible.
Yeah, and I think WA-BLOC has also taken that and thought a lot about like staff in schools, right, and school systems.
Yeah, I don't think we expected to do this, but we had to invest a lot in the adults in the building to show them how to model those practices and model that relationship building and model that, conflict resolution, so that they could see the value of restorative practices, and then finally open the space so that young people could be leading that work in the building, because young people can lead community building no problem. Like, kids have the best questions. They have the best community building questions, like would you rather, get to know you things, and they're so creative, and they have all the wisdom in the world to be able to really transform their school community. I think one of the things that WA-BLOC has had an opportunity to do is partner with an elementary school for like 4 or 5 years now, and the pandemic impacted a little bit of the progress, as it did many other things. But when we entered that school building, they were averaging 10 suspensions a year at the elementary level. And that's weird. Like, you have to exclude 10 elementary kids in a school year. That's like 1 kid a month. So something's obviously wrong. And over the last several years of our partnership, that suspension average has come down to 1. So most, if not all, students in the school building are able to stay in the school building. And it's the school culture and climate data has improved significantly. Staff want to be there. They want to work together. Kids want to be there. They want to learn together and be in trusting relationships with each other and the adults in the building. And that's amazing. We see whole classroom conversations being able to emerge around things like gossip or bullying, or some of the early issues that you start to see pop up in an environment like an elementary school. And we're doing like incredible skill building for young people, where everyone in the community gets to take responsibility for what's harming the community.
Is there anything you want to add about changes that you're seeing that you really want to uplift?
Yeah, I think it's been really cool to see that like 70% of our youth are reaching their own goals. So they're setting their own goals with their community navigator, and they're reaching them. And that's a huge percentage. And 80% of them are building skills. And these are like job skills. These are communication, nonviolent communication skills. These are just skills in things that they're interested in, whether that's the arts or whether that's in healing too, like being able to even express in conflict what they're going through too. And most importantly, 90% of them have said that they feel more connected to people. And I think that that's really where healing occurs, is when you're feeling safe enough to feel connected to the people around you, to your own culture, to the community. And so we're seeing that a lot, and that's what's being self-reported by them. And another area that I feel like we're seeing a lot of interesting things arrive is harm parties. The people who have been harmed are also sharing that the immediate restitution is making a huge difference in their life. And I'm hearing stories about like even just like able to pay the restitution of getting a car fixed, able to pay the restitution of fixing a fence.
And being able to get someone restitution quickly and community relationships is a really powerful thing, because most victims of crime feel isolated. They don't want to be around more relationships. They don't feel like their needs are responded to. And when we think about abolition or restorative practices, or abolition and restorative practices, since those are two different things, our goal is actually to respond both to the person who's experienced harm and the person accused of causing harm in a much more holistic way. And I think RCP doing that is a really important step in the right direction for King County.
Yeah. And that holistic piece too is it's not just about addressing the harm that was caused in that one incident. These youth are getting to experience healing over systemic harm too. And I think that's where, when we're seeing these harm parties participate in the programming, they're also experiencing healing, not just of that incident. It's healing of other incidences that have happened over their entire lifetime.
Punishment looks at an individual act and an individual person and says, these things will happen to you because you did these things. And in the RJ world, really striving to think about, how do we see each other's humanity? How do we meet each other's needs? So we can take a much deeper, broader look at what all is happening in a person's life that brought them to making that decision.
For the folks that are listening, and this can be viewers, funders, political reps, there's a wide variety of people that this could reach. What do you want folks to know about how to support your orgs like yours, or this restorative justice movement in our area? What's really important for folks to know about what's needed if they want to support?
On the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, money. Just the opportunity to experiment, the opportunity to be creative, the opportunity to try on different programming and try on different responses and solutions, because human beings are so complex. There's no one single solution. And we know that, and we're not claiming that there is. And restorative practices is just this beautiful umbrella of possibilities. And I think it's just really hard for institutions to to deal with the fact that there's not one binary yes, no, this, that. It's let's all work together the hard way and figure out how we can meet the needs of people who have really different needs. Experimentation. We've talked about this, these oppressive systems have had hundreds and hundreds of years to build each other up, to strengthen each other, to become more and more oppressive. And then, we have this a little bit over a decade movement going on in Seattle, and everyone's looking around why isn't this working yet? That's absurd. We've had less than $10 million total probably to be able to really do this work with fidelity and with integrity.
Absolutely. I think we have to stop being expected to operate as pilot programs.
Yeah.
And part of that does mean giving us robust funding that actually fits our needs, funding that lets us meet basic needs of folks that are connected to our programs, but also funding that allows us to pay our staff at a level that they can live in King County. I feel that's probably one of my biggest arguments with funders is you pay your staff too much, and I'm I can never pay my staff too much to take on all this secondary trauma, and honestly, and do systems that impact them daily. Most of our team are people who are also impacted by the systems that we're trying to dismantle and build something new around. So, in addition to the money, it's give us enough to actually run our programs well and not have to be constantly worried about, can I sustain this? Can our team sustain? Can our young people have their needs met? And to your point about more room to experiment, we don't have to have the blueprint for the whole societal solution. That's not fair. Despite having ran for office, I am not an elected official, and it is not my job right now to write the whole blueprint. And so I would say give our programs enough time to do what we're setting out to do and to have the opportunity to evolve. Because I know that when we walk into a courtroom and they're looking at a young person's case, they don't know what to do for that young person either. And we can't keep applying these one-size-fits-all solutions to such multifaceted, and they're not even solutions, one-size-fits-all punishments to these multifaceted societal crises. Really giving us time to figure that out. And then last, I would just say, for those of y'all who are able to vote, stop voting for politicians who are not interested in doing things new. The definition of insanity is repeating the same action, expecting different results. We've literally been doing that. And as we watch King County like try to go full steam ahead back towards the tough on crime era, we need to hold ourselves back from the fear that we just need to get people out of society and push ourselves toward this vision of the plethora and the multiplicity of options that we have. Like the human condition that we're experiencing is expansive, but our ability to respond to it with care is actually that much more expansive. And so we need to be pushing our political structure and our electeds to try new things.
Time. Definitely time. People need time. We need time to heal just in general, and we need space, like we were talking about. We need space to heal. And I echo all of that. And I also think like educating ourselves on what is the carceral system and why are we putting kids in jail. Like even just that concept of educating yourself of, is punishment really it? Because it's not. And so I think encouraging us all to continue learning and growing so that we can continue doing this work and that damage just stops happening, that we can abolish that system.
So what is one word that describes what you were doing and why you do it? You don't have to stick to one word.
I feel like my one word is expansive. Because there's just a lot of possibility in it, and we're not necessarily running with an agenda outside of holding space for folks' humanity and healing. And so it just feels like the possibilities, the good possibilities are endless. So I think we're really trying in this moment at Creative Justice to sit in the expansiveness of what's in front of us.
I think for me, the word is care, because I think we all have an idea of like what care is in our mind, but I think to have an opportunity to actually like use your hands and your feet to care for someone, whether that's like someone has cramps and they need Tylenol, you know, or like someone needs a cup of water. I think that's what care actually is meeting those physical needs and meeting those emotional needs by just being a good friend. Yeah, I think care and the opportunity to care is there in this work and in restorative justice. So that's my word. Care.
I'm gonna say joy, because I think even though it's hard, it's really fun. It's really fun to see the arc of a relationship being built, or to see the arc of healing in myself and other people, and to see the arc of possibility and expansion as we come up with new ways to revamp our programs or measure growth, or tell a story or hear a story of progress or transformation. And I like to laugh, so I'd be making jokes in my circles, you feel me? Like, if we're not hee hee ha ha, then start over. Start over.
Well, thanks y'all for coming together today. I feel like you're so in it and you get to have these conversations all the time. But a lot of folks, if they hear of restorative justice, almost don't even know what it is or how it plays out, that it's not one way or just one doorway into this big movement and this big work. So just thank you for coming together. Thank you all for joining us. And I hope we get to do this again soon. I had so many questions.